I always thought wealth was my greatest asset. I was wrong. My name is Mark, and for 5 years, I believed I had it all: a successful tech company, a beautiful penthouse, and a wife, Chloe, who I thought was my soulmate. We met at a charity gala. She was stunning, with a laugh that could light up a room. She seemed to love me for who I was, not the money in my bank account. Or so I thought. The first crack appeared on a lazy Sunday morning. I was making coffee when Chloe's phone buzzed on the counter. A message flashed on the screen from her best friend, Jessica. "Is he still clueless? Remember the plan, we're so close." My blood ran cold. Clueless? Plan? I stood there, frozen, the coffee pot dripping onto the granite. It was a tiny thing, a few words, but felt like the world had just shifted under my feet. I poured the coffee, my hands steady, but my mind was racing. I had to be smart. If there was a plan, I needed to know it. I decided in that moment to become the clueless husband they thought I was. I would be one step ahead. I started paying attention, really paying attention, to the little things. Chloe's spending had increased lately. She'd always loved shopping, but now the bags were from designers I knew she previously thought were too flashy. "For you, nothing is too much, my love," she'd say, kissing my cheek. I'd smile back, playing my part. I began working later at the office, not because I had to, but to give her space. Space to make a mistake. I also called an old friend from college, Ben, who now ran a private security firm. I met him for a discreet lunch. "I need your help, Ben. I think my marriage is a lie." He listened, his expression grim. He knew me before the money, before the success. He was the only one I trusted. "I'll look into it, Mark." Discreetly. A week later, he called me back. His voice was tense. "It's not good. Chloe has been visiting an apartment across town. A man named Kyle lives there. They have a history." He sent me a photo. It was Chloe laughing, holding hands with a man I'd never seen. The date stamp was from 2 days ago. The betrayal was a physical pain in my chest. But beneath the hurt, the cold, calculating part of me awakened. The game was on. Armed with Ben's information, I began my own investigation. I needed to understand their endgame. I remembered Chloe had been unusually interested in my will and life insurance policies a few months back. She'd framed it as concern for our future. Now it felt sinister. I decided to test the waters. That evening over dinner, I sighed and rubbed my temples. "Rough day at the office, sweetheart," I said. The new investor pulled out. "It's going to be a tight few months financially." I watched her closely. Her smile tightened for a fraction of a second before she reached for my hand. "Oh, Mark, don't worry. We have plenty. We'll be fine." There was no genuine concern in her eyes, only a flicker of something else. Annoyance? Panic? Later, I pretended to be asleep and heard her whispering on the phone in the walk-in closet. "A setback," he says. "Yes, I know, but we have to be patient." My heart hammered against my ribs. It was all true. She wasn't just having an affair. She and this Kyle were waiting for a payday. My payday. I felt a cold rage solidify within me. They wanted my money? They would have to earn it. The next morning, I put phase 1 of my plan into action. I called my most trusted accountant, Linda, into my office. I laid out the situation for her, my voice low and steady. Her eyes widened, but she nodded in understanding. "We need to create a shadow ledger," I explained. "The official books will show a company in slow decline. The real finances will be hidden." Linda, a woman of few words but fierce loyalty, got to work. Meanwhile, I began the process of quietly transferring my liquid assets. I moved stocks, bonds, and cash into new, secure accounts under a holding company Ben helped me establish. It was a complex web designed to be untraceable to anyone not looking for it specifically. That evening, I came home looking defeated. I slumped onto the sofa. "The board is asking tough questions, Chloe," I murmured. "The company, it might not survive the year." She sat beside me, patting my knee. "It's just money, Mark. We have each other." The lie was so smooth, so practiced. I almost admired it. But I saw the way her eyes darted around our expensive living room, as if calculating how much it would all sell for. A week later, Ben delivered another piece of the puzzle. He had managed to get audio from a conversation between Chloe and Kyle in a public park. I listened, my fists clenching. Kyle's voice was sharp, greedy. "How long is this going to take? I'm tired of waiting. You need to push him harder on the life insurance. An accident would be quick." Chloe's reply was colder than I could have imagined. "Be patient. A sudden death brings suspicion. A business failure followed by a depression, then a suicide that's cleaner. The payout is guaranteed." I stopped the recording, my breath catching in my throat. They weren't just after my money, they were planning my death. The cold rage inside me turned to ice. Suicide. They were crafting a narrative where I would take my own life. I thought of the sleeping pills my doctor had recently prescribed for my stress. Were they planning to use those? I went to the bathroom and flushed the entire bottle down the toilet. I would not be their victim. I would be the architect of their downfall. Their clean plan was about to get very, very messy. I spent the night in my home office, the recorded words playing on a loop in my mind. Suicide. The word felt like a stain on my soul. I looked at the framed photos on my desk, our wedding day, a trip to Italy, simpler times. Had any of it been real? I allowed myself 1 hour of grief, of staring into the abyss of her betrayal. Then I locked the emotion away. When dawn broke, my plan was clear. They wanted a narrative of a failing businessman sinking into despair. I would give them one. I started subtly changing my behavior. I began skipping shaves, letting a shadow of stubble darken my jaw. I started drinking a single glass of whiskey each night, making sure Chloe saw it. I let my shoulders slump, my smiles become rare and forced. I was building the character of a man under immense pressure, a man crumbling. I was the director, and my life was the stage. Chloe watched my performance, and I saw the satisfaction in her eyes. She was buying it. She thought her plan was working perfectly. It was time to make the financial decline tangible. I created a fake client, Ether Holdings, and fabricated a massive contract. I brought home a thick blue folder filled with complex diagrams and projections. "This is it, Chloe," I said, a faint spark of hope in my eyes. "This deal with Ether can save the company. It's all or nothing." For days, I acted obsessed, talking about nothing else. Then I staged the collapse. I came home one evening, pale and shaken. I threw the blue folder onto the kitchen counter. "It's over," I whispered, my voice cracking. They pulled out. "The deal is dead. We're finished." I sank into a chair and put my head in my hands. Chloe rushed over, her performance of the concerned wife impeccable. "Oh, Mark. How could they? What will we do?" But as she hugged me, I could feel the quick, excited beat of her heart against my chest. She wasn't sad, she was thrilled. The final piece of their puzzle was falling into place. With the financial ruin complete, I knew the next phase of their plan would accelerate. I was right. A few days later, Chloe approached me with fake tears in her eyes. "Mark, maybe we should talk to the bank? We could get a loan against the penthouse? Just to tide us over." It was a test. She wanted to see how desperate I was, to gauge how easily I would sign away my assets. I looked at her, letting my eyes well up with real tears, tears of bitterness for the woman she had pretended to be. "No," I said hoarsely. "I won't lose our home. I need some air." I walked out, leaving her standing there. I went straight to Ben. "It's time," I told him. "I need constant surveillance on both of them. I want to know every move they make, every word they say." The net was closing in. I just needed them to make one final, irreversible move. Ben's surveillance paid off immediately. He called me, his voice tight. "They're getting impatient. Kyle is pushing her. He said, the longer we wait, the more he can lose. We need to act now." Then Ben delivered the crucial piece of information. "Kyle has a record, Mark. A short stint for fraud 5 years ago. Chloe was dating him at the time." So that was the connection. She had always been drawn to his dangerous, get-rich-quick schemes. Now, they saw me as the ultimate scheme. I used this information. I had a friend at the bank discreetly freeze a large portion of our joint account, citing suspicious activity. When Chloe tried to withdraw a significant sum the next day, she was denied. She came home furious. "What's going on with our accounts, Mark?" I played dumb, adding a layer of paranoia. The banks, they know. They know the company is failing. They're cutting us off. I watched the panic finally truly enter her eyes. Their plan was hitting unexpected snags. The final act began on a Friday night. Chloe, trying to regain control, was unusually affectionate. She made my favorite meal. She poured me a glass of expensive wine. "You've been so stressed, my love," she cooed. "Let's just relax tonight." I played along, but I was hyper-aware. When she went to the kitchen to get dessert, I quickly switched our wine glasses. She returned and took a sip from her glass, the one I had just drunk from. She didn't even notice. My blood turned to ice. Later, pretending to be drowsy, I went to bed. As soon as I heard her soft, fake snores, I slipped out of bed and went to the home office. I took the wine glass she had used, sealing it carefully in a plastic bag. The next morning, I delivered it to a private lab Ben recommended. The results came back 48 hours later. The wine had been laced with a powerful prescription sedative. The same kind I used to be prescribed. It was the first physical evidence. They weren't just planning my death anymore. They had started the process. Holding the lab report felt like holding a death warrant, my own. The clinical language detailing the sedative in the wine made the threat terrifyingly real. The initial cold rage was now a focused, burning purpose. They had crossed a line from conspiracy to attempted crime. I met with Ben and my lawyer, Susan Gray, in a secure location. I slid the lab report across the table. Susan's face was grim. "This is enough for a restraining order and to begin criminal proceedings," she stated. I shook my head. A restraining order would only make them change their plan. I want them to finish it. I want everything out in the open. We devised a new strategy. I would continue the charade of my decline, but I would also present a final, irresistible opportunity, a way for them to get their money and be rid of me all at once. I would dangle the bait, and they, in their greed, would have to take it. The bait was a fictional inheritance. I created documents, with Ben's help, stating that a reclusive uncle I'd supposedly been close to had passed away, leaving me a secluded, valuable property upstate. I brought the news home to Chloe, acting dazed. "I can't believe it. Uncle Leo, he's gone. But he left me the lake house. It's worth a fortune." I saw the calculations going on behind her eyes. A solitary property. A grieving, unstable husband. It was perfect for them. "We should go up there," Chloe suggested gently a few days later. "You need peace and quiet. We can assess the property, maybe even sell it to save the company." Her concern was a well-rehearsed lie. I agreed, feigning gratitude for her support. The stage was being set. I knew what they planned for me at that isolated lake house. I would be going, but I wouldn't be going alone. In the days before the trip, Chloe's behavior became subtly triumphant. She stopped pretending to be as concerned, a new confidence in her stride. She and Kyle were communicating more frequently, using a coded messaging app Ben was now monitoring. "The cabin is perfect," Kyle had written. "No neighbors for miles. We stick to the plan. A tragic accident for him, a fresh start for us." I ensured all my real assets were completely locked down. I updated my will, explicitly disinheriting Chloe and naming my sister as the beneficiary, with a detailed letter to my lawyer explaining the situation. I was tying up every loose end. I packed a bag for the weekend, my hands steady. Alongside my clothes, I had a small voice-activated recorder and a GPS tracker Ben had given me. I was walking into the lion's den, but I was the one holding the key. The drive to the lake house was tense and quiet. Chloe made hollow conversation about the scenery, while I played the part of a broken man, staring blankly out the window. The house itself was real, a property Ben had arranged for us to use through a shell company. It was rustic and, as promised, utterly isolated. The first evening was unnervingly normal. Chloe cooked a simple meal. We ate in silence. I could feel the anticipation radiating from her. Later, I pretended to take a sleeping pill, a harmless placebo I'd brought, and went to bed early. I lay awake in the dark, the recorder on, and hidden, listening. I heard her on the phone downstairs, her voice a hushed, excited whisper. "He's asleep. Tomorrow during the boat ride. You're sure the engine will fail? Good. He can't swim well. It will be quick." The confirmation was both a horror and a relief. The end game was here. The next morning, the sun was deceptively bright. Chloe was unusually cheerful. "It's such a beautiful day. Let's take the boat out, Mark. There's an old one in the shed. It'll be good for you to get some fresh air." Her performance was flawless, but her eyes were too bright, too eager. I agreed, my heart pounding a steady rhythm of dread and resolve. I activated the recorder and tracker, slipping them into my pocket. The boat was a small, rickety thing. We pushed off from the dock, the silence of a lake enveloping us. I watched Chloe's hands waiting. We were about 100 yards from shore when she suddenly stood, feigning a gasp. "Mark, look. Is that smoke from the engine?" As she said it, she deliberately rocked the boat, hard. The motor sputtered and died on cue. The boat lurched violently. I met her gaze across the small space. For a single, frozen second, I saw not my wife, but a predator. Then, she screamed and shoved me with all her strength. I fell backward into the cold, dark water. The icy water was a shock, but I was ready. I let myself sink for a moment, then kicked away from the boat, moving underwater parallel to the shore. I was a stronger swimmer than I had ever let on. I surfaced quietly behind a cluster of reeds, hidden from view. I could see the boat and Chloe standing in it, peering into the water where I'd fallen. She wasn't calling for help. She was waiting. After a full minute, a smile twisted her lips, a look of grim triumph. She pulled out her phone. "It's done," she said, her voice clear and cold across the water. "He's gone. He fell in and didn't come up. The current must have taken him." She was already crafting the story for the authorities. I stayed hidden, the recorder in my waterproof pouch, capturing every word. This was the confession I needed. I waited until Chloe started the boat's engine, which, predictably, worked perfectly now, and headed back to the dock. Then I swam to a prearranged point down the shore where Ben was waiting, hidden in the trees. He handed me a dry towel and a change of clothes. "You got it?" he asked. I nodded, holding up the recorder. "Everything." We moved quickly. While Chloe was presumably calling the police to report my accidental drowning, we were driving to the local sheriff's office. I walked in alive and well, as Ben handed over the recorded evidence. The sheriff, a stern-faced man we had discreetly briefed days earlier, listened to the recording of Chloe's phone call. His expression hardened. "Let's go have a chat with your wife," he said. We arrived at the lake house just as a patrol car was pulling up, responding to Chloe's distress call. She was on the porch, performing the role of the grieving widow beautifully, sobbing into her hands. When she saw me step out of the sheriff's car, dry and alive, her face went slack with pure, undiluted shock. The sob caught in her throat. "And Mark," she stammered. The sheriff stepped forward. "Chloe, we need to talk about what happened on that boat today. We have a recording of a phone call you made." Her eyes darted from me to the sheriff, the pieces clicking into place in her mind. The performance was over. The mask fell, and raw, terrified understanding took its place. She was read her rights right there on the porch of the house where she planned my murder. In the days that followed, the case unraveled quickly. With Chloe in custody, she quickly turned on Kyle to save herself. She gave a full statement, detailing their entire plan from the beginning, the targeted meeting, the fake love, the financial manipulation, and the final plot at the lake house. Kyle was arrested at his apartment. The evidence was overwhelming. The recorded confession, the lab report on the sedative, their message history, and now Chloe's testimony. They were both charged with conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder. I granted Chloe a divorce on my terms. She got nothing. The prenuptial agreement, which she had signed so eagerly, held up perfectly. She traded a penthouse for a prison cell. The legal proceedings were a blur. I focused on rebuilding my life, my real life. I sold the penthouse, all the memories tainted. I moved into a smaller, modern apartment that felt truly mine. My company, freed from the fake narrative of failure, began to thrive again with a renewed energy. I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. The day after the sentencing, I visited Chloe in prison. She looked smaller, stripped of her designer clothes and confident lies. "Why, Mark?" she asked, her voice hollow. "Why did you lead us on like that?" I looked at the woman I had once loved, now a stranger. "You married me for money," I said calmly. "You thought you were one step ahead. But you never understood. The game was always mine." I stood up and walked away, leaving her with the consequences of her greed. I didn't look back. The silence in my new apartment was different now. It wasn't the lonely silence of betrayal, but a peaceful, clean quiet. The legal battles were over. Chloe and Kyle were sentenced to long prison terms. The news stories died down. For the first time in over a year, my life was truly my own. I spent a week doing nothing but decompressing. I read books I'd been meaning to read. I went for long walks without a destination. I slowly relearned what it felt like to not be performing, to not be looking over my shoulder. The constant, cold tension that had lived in my shoulders for months began to melt away. I was free. Ben and I went out for a steak dinner, a proper celebration. "I have to admit, Mark," he said, raising his glass. "It was a risky plan, but you played it perfectly." I clinked my glass against his. "I couldn't have done it without you. You were the only one I trusted." It was the truth. His friendship had been my anchor. He told me he was expanding his security firm and offered me a small partnership role. I considered it. It felt good to think about the future, to make plans that weren't about survival or revenge. I was starting to look forward, not back. A month later, I decided to take a trip. I went to Italy, to a coastal town I'd always wanted to visit, but Chloe had deemed too quiet. I wandered the narrow streets, ate food I didn't recognize, and simply existed. On the third day, I met a woman named Maria at a small cafe. She was a translator visiting family. We talked for hours about nothing and everything. There was no game, no performance. I was just Mark. I didn't mention my past, my money, or the scandal. She liked me for my conversation and my laugh. It was terrifying and exhilarating. Returning home felt like stepping into a new life. I started dating Maria, slowly and honestly. I told her everything about Chloe, the betrayal, and the revenge. She listened, holding my hand, her eyes full of empathy, not judgment. You did what you had to do to survive, she said. Her understanding was a final layer of healing. Meanwhile, I sold the lake house. I didn't need the reminder or the money. I donated the proceeds to a charity that helped victims of financial fraud. It felt like closing a circle, turning their greed into something good. A year later, I was in my backyard, grilling dinner for Maria and Ben and his family. The air was filled with the sound of laughter and easy conversation. My phone buzzed with a news alert. It was a short piece about Chloe. She had been denied parole. I felt a flicker of something, not hatred, not satisfaction, just a quiet acknowledgement that justice was sustained. I deleted the alert and put my phone away. I looked at Maria, who was laughing at something Ben had said. The past was a closed book. My life now was built on trust, chosen family, and the quiet certainty that I had not just survived, I had won my future back. The man who had been a target was gone. I was finally completely myself.
If you enjoyed this story of epic revenge, do me a huge favor. Smash that like button, and make sure to subscribe for more tales of calculated justice, revenge or karma, and let me know in the comments what you think about this story. Click the arrow button to watch more interesting stories. Please note, your support helps keep the lights on and the stories coming. Thank you.